Well, here we are, 3 soundbar options from Sonos, but how do you know which is right for your setup? Let's find out. Welcome guys to our 2022 Sonos Soundbar comparison video, which hopefully will be all you need to watch to find out which Sonos soundbar is right for you. And yes, we've even got a sound test so you can listen to the differences between all 3, and that's done by our other reviewer, the binaural mic. So stick around for that. To help you work out which soundbar is right for you, I'm going to cover design, features and control, sound quality, and then some recommendations on which soundbar to go for in your home. Who knows, we might even save you some money in this video. Don't forget, we love to review these products, but if you're interested in picking up one of these, feel free to head over to our website where you can purchase one with a 6-year extended Sonos warranty and 30-day hassle-free returns policy. I expect there'll be lots of questions on this topic, so pop your questions in the comments below as we like to base our content around what you guys are asking. So out of the 3 soundbars in the Sonos lineup, the first generation Beam was the first to hit the market back in 2018, I think, and it was essentially a more compact and affordable alternative to the bigger, now discontinued Sonos Playbar. RIP. Now the Beam was actually updated to the 2nd generation, this one here in 2021, which came with a number of improvements which we'll get into later and has an RRP of $449. Alongside the Beam, we also have the Sonos Arc, which arrived in 2020 and was the replacement to the Sonos Playbar. Now the Arc was a big shift away from the design of the Playbar and is now Sonos's top of the range Atmos soundbar option, which comes in at a price of $899. And then the most recent addition to the Sonos lineup is the Sonos Ray here, released in 2022, which happens to have the smallest footprint out of all 3 and can be purchased for £279. So essentially, we're sort of looking at a good, better, best situation, but best might not necessarily be best for your setup, which is why I'm making this video for you guys. If one of these soundbars would be your first Sonos product, it's worth knowing that all of these soundbars are Wi-Fi only. So to set them up, you would give each of them mains power, make the necessary connection from the soundbar to the TV, and then use the Sonos app to complete the setup. And this is a really straightforward process. As these are Wi-Fi soundbars, there's no Bluetooth, so all of your music control is going to be done using your phones and tablets around the home, either through the Sonos app directly, or using a separate service like Spotify Connect or AirPlay 2, or with your voice on the Beam or the Arc. Now I know the lack of Bluetooth is often a gripe about some Sonos products, but connection over Wi-Fi does actually offer a more solid connection from your device to the soundbar, and there's no interruptions from what Bluetooth might cause, such as pausing the playback when someone calls you, for example. Being Wi-Fi enabled as well, it also means you're part of the Sonos ecosystem, so if you add more Sonos products over time, you can connect them all up to play the same thing or different audio in different zones. And again, that's easily controlled in the Sonos app. Now, if you would like a full tour of the Sonos app, link to that video will be here or in the description after you've watched the comparison, of course. So if we take a closer look at these soundbars then, as you can see, they're all quite different in their own right. And that's why we tend to find that the aesthetics of the soundbar actually plays quite a big part in your choice. Now, as you can see, the Arc is the widest out of the 3, coming in at a total of 114 centimeters. So I would have to say that you do have to have a minimum of about a 55-inch TV to ensure it looks natural underneath your TV. Now, with the Beam and the Ray, you could get away with using a TV smaller than 55-inch, especially the Ray, which I think is a nice size, right down to TVs which are maybe 32 inches or even a monitor. On the other end of the scale, you don't want to have a massive 75-inch TV with a little Sonos Ray or Beam, because the soundbar will end up looking very small in relation to the TV. So that's the first tip I'd give you. Consider how large your TV is going to be, because that might actually narrow down your options fairly quickly. A similar point to this is starting your purchase decision with your room size. Now, while this is not the be-all and end-all, and I'm not going to give you exact room measurements for each soundbar, it is an indicator to how much you need the soundbar to fill your space. In general, an Arc will fill a larger open plan space better than the Ray, but it might be overpowering in a small, more compact room. Back to the design of the soundbars then. Now, all 3 soundbars can be purchased in both a black or white color, and they can also all be wall mounted too using separate wall mounts. And I think there's even options for fixing the soundbar onto your TV's existing wall bracket, or using a cantilever so your TV and soundbar can move together at the same time. Now, all three soundbars use a similar material, which is a sort of polycarbonate material around the outside and a perforated grille. And I have to say, I really love the design of all three of these products. I find that with most Sonos products, they age really well due to their minimalistic and understated design. Oh, and then on all Sonos products, you actually get these Sonos touch control pads as well, consisting of volume controls, play, pause, you've got skip track, previous track, and in the case of the Sonos Beam and the Arc, you also get an additional microphone privacy button, which will actually cut the power to the microphones because the Beam and the Arc have the ability to use Amazon Alexa and Google Assistant, as well as Sonos's own voice assistant built in. So you can use the Sonos as a voice assistant too, to get your music played, news updates, etc. There's loads you can do with it. Now, the Ray doesn't have this feature, unfortunately, so that's why that button isn't there, but it is still possible to integrate the Ray with any other Alexa or Google Home devices in your home. It would just mean your commands would go through that device and not the Ray. So as you can see, I've flipped all of the soundbars around. I'll get my editors to zoom in, and as you can see, they do all look quite similar. Now, on the Beam and the Arc, you've got your power, you've got your Ethernet, you've got a single HDMI Arc connection to your TV and a join button for connecting to your Wi-Fi. Now, on the Ray, you don't actually get that HDMI Arc connection, and instead you get an optical port. So what is the main difference between them? Well, on the Beam and the Arc, these both have Dolby Atmos support, and in order to get Dolby Atmos out of the soundbar, you must connect the soundbar to a Dolby Atmos enabled TV by HDMI Arc or eArc. Now, on the Ray, you are limited to a maximum of Dolby Digital, which can be carried by a standard optical connection. So now you might be wondering what the difference is between Dolby Digital and Dolby Atmos. Well, Atmos is the latest advancement in sound processing. So essentially this is object-based rather than channel-based. And that means that when a film is made with Atmos, the directors have much more control over exactly where individual parts of the sound will pass through, which ultimately for you, the viewer, you get much more immersion. Most newer movies are available in Atmos now, so this will be the norm going forward, but there is still a huge amount of content already filmed in Dolby Digital and lots of TV channels still broadcasting in Dolby Digital. So when you watch a movie that's supported Atmos, then you'll receive Atmos, of course, through the Beam or the Arc. But if you're watching through the Ray, this will still give you Dolby Digital surround sound, which is great. Now, unfortunately, this topic is endless and it really deserves a whole video on its own. But for the purposes of this comparison, I'm just going to say that if Atmos is on your list of boxes to tick, then you'll need to look at either the Beam or the Arc. Right then, let's smoothly segue into each soundbar's internals then and talk a little bit more about the sound profile of each product. Now, first of all, what I particularly like about all three of these soundbars is that Sonos have focused a lot of attention around how they can maximize the size of each individual driver while minimizing the size of the soundbar itself, both in terms of width and height. Because at the end of the day, as TVs get slimmer and slimmer, there's increasing pressure on soundbar manufacturers to produce slim soundbars that also sound great. Now, you can also take advantage of something called True Play tuning on all three, where as long as you have an iOS device, or you can borrow one if you don't have one, you can acoustically optimize each soundbar for the environment that they're in by telling Sonos where your seating position is and walking around the room to measure the room's acoustic. Now, that's really great added value by Sonos. And within the app, you can also change things like bass and treble if you have particular preferences there as well. Starting off with the internals for the Sonos Ray then. Now you get a total of 4 Class D amplifiers, which are powering 2 tweeters for the vocals and high frequencies and 2 midwoofers for the mid-range. Now you also get this proprietary bass reflex system on each end of the soundbar, which will amp up those lower frequencies and make the bass a little bit more distortion free, which I have to say, it really does quite well. Now, a big thing to note about the Ray is that this is classed as a stereo soundbar. So that means all of your content is going to be passed through either the left or the right channel, as it doesn't have a dedicated center channel itself. And that means you can achieve up to a maximum of 4.1 Dolby Digital once you've added a pair of Sonos speakers for your surrounds and a Sonos sub. Now, all of the drivers are facing the same direction, which is directly in front. So the Ray is great for sliding into a TV stand or a media cabinet, or in a cavity where the sides are enclosed. In the Beam, we take it up a notch and you now get 5 Class D amplifiers, which are powering a single tweeter and 4 full range woofers. Now, 2 of those woofers at the end are actually outwardly facing, almost 45 degrees for a wider soundstage. You also get 3 passive radiators, which again really helps the bass and the lower frequencies achieve more impact and boom without sounding distorted. Now, a big difference between this and the Ray is that the Beam is a 3.0 soundbar in its own right. So that means it has a front left and right channel, as well as a dedicated center built in. From a sound perspective, you also unlock Dolby Atmos support, and the Beam will use its internal processing to give you the illusion that the sound is coming from above the TV or to the side, which it does a really great job in doing, despite not having dedicated sideways and upward firing channels. In simple terms, that means the sound has more places to go, so the level of separation and the detail is higher on the Beam than the Ray. However, the Arc really steps up a few gears now as the number of drivers increases up to 11 Class D amplifiers, which are powering 3 Silk Dome tweeters and 8 elliptical woofers to create a 5.0.2 configuration on its own. Now, unlike the Beam and the Ray, 2 of those woofers are sideways firing, which is actually quite rare to find on a soundbar, and another 2 are upward firing, which you can actually adjust the intensity of in the Sonos app. So these are really useful for Atmos content and projecting the sound much further and wider than its physical form, and sort of bounces the sound around the room. So if you'd like to get the best of the best for what Sonos can do and the advancements in Atmos these days, then the Arc has been crafted with you in mind. So without further ado, let's show you how they sound then using our binaural microphone. So make sure you grab a pair of headphones, so hopefully the differences between each one are then clearer. Now, of course, the sound quality is not going to translate 100% accurately over YouTube, but hopefully I can give you an indication of the differences.
Here we go again, huh?
Hello, girl, kick your ass.
Here we go again, huh?
Hello, girl, kick your ass.
Here we go again, huh?
Hello, girl, kick your ass.
So I hope the differences translated across there for you guys. My general summary is that all 3 soundbars have excellent vocal clarity. You should have been able to really make out the singer's lyrics and the dialogue. I think Sonos have done a fantastic job in making the sound profile of each soundbar almost the same, but it's put on a larger scale as you go up the range. Now, as you upgrade from the Ray to the Beam or from the Beam to the Arc, the mid-range, the bass, and the size of the soundstage are noticeably more impressive. From the Ray to the Beam, you can notice it straight away. The sound is more encompassing, it has sort of more bass impact, and the level of detail is higher. Of course, this is just taken to another level with the Arc because of those sideways and upward firing drivers. Now, the microphone might not have been able to capture it, I don't know, as it is only 2-channel, but the sound can really reach areas in your room that you never thought were possible. If a helicopter was to fly over, you actually get the impression that it's going above the TV, which you just don't get as much with the Ray and the Beam. Those 3 tweeters as well, instead of 1, also help the vocals to sound as clear as they possibly can be. One thing I think is good to highlight actually is that all 3 of these soundbars offer what's called speech enhancement and night mode in the Sonos app. The speech enhancement essentially boosts the audio frequencies that are associated with the human voice, which basically means your dialogue is boosted. And then night mode is handy when you're listening at low volumes, if it's late at night, things like that. And what it will do is reduce the intensity of those louder sounds while slightly increasing quieter sounds. So that means you're not going to have to turn up the volume when you're listening to quieter dialogue heavy scenes. So as you can see, I've added in a Sonos sub and a Sonos rear. Now, if you're not familiar with Sonos or you need a refresher, you can add rear surround speakers and or a Sonos sub to all 3 of these Sonos soundbars. A great little perk is that if you do decide to add surrounds or a sub to your Sonos soundbar, they will free up some of the processing power for your Sonos soundbar by offloading some of those channels encoding. Now, I'd say for the Beam and the Ray, most of you are first going to want to add surrounds first, but not only because this is the next affordable upgrade, but also because this has a significant impact to the dynamics of your system. We have done a full video on adding Sonos surrounds to a Sonos soundbar, so do check that out for our recommendations. But the essentials to know is that adding those surrounds will work to bridge the gap between the front and the rear, which will then put you in the center of the action. A great example of this is if you're watching sport, you actually feel like you're in the stands with the fans due to the nature of the sound. And then the sub is usually the last element to be added, primarily because it comes with a higher price tag, of course, and we usually find that the Beam and the Ray could be used in rooms which might not need extra bass, or you might have bought them on the premise that you can listen without having to worry about disturbing your neighbors. If you do choose to add a sub to the Beam, then that's a really nice combo for those who listen to bass-heavy tracks or lots of action movies. If I'm being honest, I wouldn't recommend adding the sub to the Ray because it will most likely be overpowering and that extra budget can then be better used elsewhere. Now, if rumours of a sub mini ever came true, then I think that would be a great combination with the Ray. For the Arc, you may wish to add a sub or surrounds first, depending on what you're looking for. So if you're going for a more cinematic feel, then the sub brings you closer to actually being at the cinema using that deep rumbling bass. If you're looking for more immersion from having the audio all around you, then of course the rears will be a good addition. What will be a very interesting comparison is the Beam and 1SL setup versus the Ray and Sub Mini, if that option ever came. So I think my job here is to make your decision easier about which soundbar to choose. So in order to do that, the first question I think you should ask yourself is, are you interested in Atmos support and pursuing the best sound quality available at the moment? If so, I think you can discount the Ray straight away. Of course, not forgetting the Ray doesn't offer voice support either. This is really a no-fuss soundbar for those that would like to enhance their TV audio, make the vocals crystal clear, and add a new dimension of sound to their viewing experience. Now, where we find the Ray really useful is for those people that want to fill a room with great sounding music, but also for a TV so it can double up as a soundbar for your TV and a speaker to stream music to. And that's why this is a great soundbar for a bedroom, a gaming setup, or a snug area. And as I mentioned earlier, is the only one you can use if the soundbar is going to be enclosed in a shelf or in a recessed area, really. In fact, it might be that the Ray is a great first or second soundbar for your home, depending on your requirements. Now, the Beam versus the Arc debate is not quite so straightforward, and really, I'd love to have a conversation with each and every one of you, so I don't need to make general comparisons. Ultimately, which one you should go for here should largely depend on how seriously you take your movies and music. Yes, the Arc is better, there is no doubt there, but the Beam does offer more performance per pound. So the budget you have and the space you're looking to fill really play a large part in the Beam or the Arc debate. The Arc has also been designed with Atmos at the forefront, with those dedicated upwards and sideways firing drivers to really get the most out of Atmos content. However, the Arc's physical dimensions means you do have to consider your current TV setup and room size to make it worth it, as well as how much you're pushing your budget, of course. So if there are any limitations here, the Beam Gen 2 is an excellent middle ground option as it can still give you that Atmos experience, but at a smaller footprint and budget. Now we do actually have a dedicated video on choosing between the Arc and the Beam, which will be in the description below if you'll find that useful. Now guys, if you do want any other comparisons of different setups and combinations, then comment them down below and I'll try to help you out. So I hope you found this showdown useful. Remember, the links to each product are in the description below where you can find the latest pricing and take advantage of our 6-year warranty if you wanted to. Now let me know in the comments which one you'll be choosing. I'm really interested to hear your thoughts. Thanks for watching as ever, and I'll see you very soon.